Time for the papers this morning with the lawyer Andrew Eborn and the journalist Emma Wolfe. Morning to you both.
Good morning.
Let's kick off with the Sun, Emma. Vapes, disposable vapes, are going to be banned in about 8 months.
Yeah, so 1st of June 2025. This kind of comes quite soon after the pub banning outdoor smoking at pubs, so more accusations of nanny statism from our glorious leader. This is really about stopping young people. It's kids and young people that are very drawn to the disposable vapes with the fun flavours like bubblegum and candy floss and cola and all of that kind of thing. But it's also about the throwaway culture. So 5 million vapes are thrown away every week.
Oh, so it is a lot of waste.
It's about, you know, really cracking down on the huge toll, kind of the litter in the environment. So the disposable vapes, not the the refillable vapes, they will be still available. The doctors like them. They like to be able to switch people from smoking real cigarettes to, God, it's keep up with all these different vapes. But yeah, so it's going to be the disposable, the fun vapes that actually Rishi Sunak was very concerned about, wasn't he?
He was. They say it's to stop the kids. I mean, the reality is the law says already you have to be 18 to buy these vapes. When we were growing up, they used to do these little candy cigarettes. You remember those? And the little coconut tobacco and that sort of stuff. Because the industry was trying to obviously educate people early about sort of trying to persuade them. But you're right about the nanny state stuff, because you're turning around and Raspberry Ripple and these all glorious flavours, which were designed with colours as well to attract kids. But if the law's already there, it's about enforcement of the law rather than just necessarily dealing with the other stuff as well.
Yeah, but there is the waste issue.
Definitely on the environmental side, absolutely.
And you'll notice in towns and cities across country, now I've said it to you, you're going to notice it everywhere you go.
Yes.
If you look at bins in your town centres, white stickers all around the top of those bins, it's from disposable vapes.
Yeah.
And they are covered, which is indicative, really, of how many are being thrown away every single day. Andrew, let's have a look at the Daily Telegraph, shall we? And this is Starmer's top aides are drawn into Trump row.
Well, Trump is brilliant at dominating the headlines for everything. You might remember the previous election, they talked about Russian interference. I reckon, I've got a theory, that basically what he's trying to do is to get in there early. What the campaign does, and some of the newspapers talk about it, there was a deleted LinkedIn post by Sophia Patel. And what happened, that basically said, it was asking if anyone would be willing to travel to the US to help our friends across the pond elect their first female president. Show those Yanks how to win elections, is what she said on this thing. And as you rightly said at the beginning of the show, it's about funding. If you do it privately, then it's not an issue. The question is whether the Labour do as well. Well, Trump is a master at dominating the headlines. I just got back from Cannes, and there was a glorious thing there by the co-editor of Variety, and he did this exposure about The Apprentice in Wonderland, it's called, and how Trump is effectively playing the role of a president. He learnt it all from Mark Burnett, who basically gave him the way to sort of do all the sound bites and so on and so forth. But basically, he was an apprentice star. This is why he did so well. And he was originally going to run against Obama in 2012, but he was being paid too much by NBC at that stage to run. So what's happening now, I reckon he's deliberately done this so that the narrative is against Kamala, and that's how to pronounce her name, Kamala Harris, as a result of it. But it's not going to go away. He's going to use this to his advantage, and he'll continue to do so. But it does beg questions, as you wisely said, about sort of Nigel Farage went over. He's a very famous supporter of Trump, but he probably did that on his own buck.
It is a bit different. It's a bit different when you've got 100 or more Labour sort of staffers and activists going over there. I know they were volunteering.
But they've always done it.
Always done it.
They all did it with Obama and...
Yeah, I know. I just don't think we should be interfering. And, you know, Morgan McSweeney, what's he doing over there? There's plenty to focus on in this country. So I do think, OK, it's always been done, but I do think that
it's illegal to interfere, but it's about who funds it. And so that'll all come out. But the story will run and run and run.
It will.
I mean, wasn't it David Cameron, though, was it John McCain when he was running?
Yes.
Or at least running for the ticket and said, you know, and welcomed him to the UK and said, this is the next president of the United States.
No, you're absolutely right.
And surely the more important point is that it may well be that Starmer has to work with a Trump in the White House, much as that, you know, will
so much for the special
all the left.
We're out of time, you two. I'm very sorry. And it was quick. Here's the weather. It's 7:45. Let's have a look at some front pages for you this morning.
And The Sun leads on an exclusive that disposable vapes are set to be banned across the UK from next June.
The Telegraph says senior aides to the Prime Minister are in that row with Donald Trump over claims the party broke US electoral law.
The front of the Eye says former Justice Secretaries are banding together to warn cuts to next week's budget could be a disaster for victims of crime.
Sticking with the budget, the Mail says financial experts furious over rumours the Chancellor could introduce tax on private sector employers' pension contributions.
And the FT reports that Goldman Sachs and Apple have been fined $89 million over credit card issues.
Oh dear. Right, let's talk to lawyer Andrew Eborn and the writer Emma Wolfe. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you both. Emma, let's start with this. It's in the Times.
Yeah.
Is this... I mean, I've seen it reported over the last sort of month or so. It's the most horrific rape trial in France, which just beggars belief.
Yeah, and this woman now in her early 70s, Gisèle Pelicot, who has been talking and who insisted on having this terrible rape trial. She waived her right to anonymity. She insisted on having the rape trial as a public trial. Has been speaking about her ex-husband, who seems to have been crushing up sedatives and sleeping pills and invited over 50 men to rape her.
While she was unconscious.
While she was unconscious. And just the woman's courage. I mean, women all over France, women all over the world, victims all over the world have been amazed at her courage, how she's spoken out about this. She has faced she has faced people in court. She faced her husband in court. She says, I'm a woman who is totally destroyed and I don't know how I'm going to rebuild myself. But she hasn't given up.
But
she wants to change. She wants to change the shame that people feel around accusing people of rape.
But what is with her? I mean, reading the piece, when she talks about the fact that her husband was someone she adored, who...
They were married for 50 years, happily married.
She thought doted on her and adored her, and then he was doing all of this.
He was doing all of this, and that's part of the thing about changing this narrative. Many of the wives and girlfriends of some of the people who raped her were saying, but I didn't think my partner would ever do that. And I think this is part of her sort of mission, is to change the narrative around rape culture and to end the shame and the stigma that people feel from coming forward. I think she's an incredibly courageous woman.
She absolutely is. And the fact that she wants to basically waive her anonymity is the point. And the powerful words she said, it's not for us to have shame, it's for them. And that's working on that sort of basis.
It is worth pointing out that some of the men involved in this trial are denying the claims against him because they thought she was a willing participant, but her husband has admitted his part in this. So... And
the French media have been described these men as Joe Blogs men, because that is what is so frightening about all of this. I mean,
and they were sort of recruited online. The husband said, you can come and do this. Absolutely.
It is important. Whilst the husband's admitted, you're absolutely right. We need to... Those who are denying it needs to go through the fair process, and there shouldn't be trial in the media. But for her to speak out, when clearly the husband's admitted doing this, very, very brave of her to do it. And as you say, there's no shame on her. It's the shame is for them.
And also, as an older woman, I think it's incredibly powerful what she's saying. It's somehow, as a woman, I don't know whether you agree, Ellie, but there's something very, very even more dignified about this woman coming out. I mean, these rapes took place in their own home. Many of them took place in their home in Provence. And there was this woman who didn't even realise this was happening, and people coming into her home where she lived with her husband for more than 50 years.
Yeah, it's just an absolutely horrific story, isn't it? I think one thing that's really haunting, listening to her yesterday, was saying that she's not even sure she's going to live long enough to unpack exactly what happened to her as a woman in her 70s. I mean, how can you ever?
Andrew, can we have a look at this?
Yes.
In the Daily Mail, the Chancellor, it's claimed, we don't know, we won't know until Wednesday, but there's this apparent raid on private sector.
Yes.
Not public sector, just private.
Extraordinary. So what happened? And again, they're drip-feeding the story. This is the way they tend to do it before budgets come out. They drip-feed stories to see what the reaction might be. Nobody knows is the short answer yet until it's declared. But what they're sort of saying is that experts blast the Chancellor's plan to impose national insurance on employers' pension contribution, but not for those in the public sector. And what rings in your ears is that we're not going to raise taxes on the ordinary working man. Well, what's that? What they really were hinting at is that weasel words is going to turn around on employers, and probably going to be national insurance on that. They're going to start raiding pensions. They're going to start looking at, obviously, things like savings and things like shares and so on and so forth. But that's what they're turning around and saying, is that it will be on the other side, on private enterprise, but not on the public side. You're right to point out, however, we don't know yet, and this could just be a story that's being fed yet another story, and where they dip their toe in the water to see what the temperature might be.
But doesn't something like this hinder economic growth?
Of course it
because
does.
Small businesses would then be more reluctant to hire anybody.
And the majority of businesses in this country, what we rely upon for small growth, for economic growth, is small business, small and medium enterprise.
Absolutely right.
And I think it may be the dipping a toe in the water. It seems a bit late in the day to be doing this.
Yes.
It may be the kind of, putting the worst scenarios out there, drip-feeding the worst scenarios so that it feels a bit better. But one thing's for sure, this budget next Wednesday is going to be extremely painful.
But actually,
a lot of people are dreading this. And it does feel like an attack on regular working people who are trying to run businesses.
It's weasel words, as I say. But as she is dipping her toe in the water on that sort of basis, what should she do, I guess, is the question.
Emma, let's stay on the theme of the budget, shall we? And look at the eye. And this is talking about budget cuts being a disaster for victims of crime.
Yeah, this is about the justice, the budget for justice. Unlike health and education and defence, the justice budget is actually not protected. And it's worth around, the Ministry of Justice budget last year was 13.2 billion. So it's a pretty, it's a pretty sizable chunk of money. It covers things like prisons and courts and probation, youth custody, legal aid, things like that. But we've got a real crisis. This is what Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, has been saying. We need the money. She's apparently gone over the head of Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, and is appealing directly to the Prime Minister. She's saying, please, 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 don't cut our budget. We've got a huge backlog in the courts, a massive, an alarming backlog, not only from COVID, but just from chronic underfunding, inefficiency, whatever it is. We've got 75,000 cases still waiting to be heard, and that's in Crown Courts alone.
Yes.
Now, people are having their trials set for 2027. So trials are being set for 3 years hence. And what Shabana Mahmood and also previous Justice Secretaries are saying is this is failing the victims of crime. This is failing, this is failing our entire...
And the justice system is creaking at the moment, which is why they're letting people out early. We can't accommodate people in the system. It needs to be far more efficient. Justice needs to be done and also be seen to be done. And that's the reality. You start cutting this down and cutting down court time, which is part of the problem. It means that justice is not being done. But also, this is going back to the two-tier care thing. Certain crimes, in inverted commas, are being accelerated, where others are being sort of pushed back further down the line.
How do you tackle that? I mean, because
AI is one way, and they're using that. And seriously, is what they're doing in certain countries. They're using AI to make things more efficient, because the whole thing about law, it should be a science, not an art. So you're turning around and saying that everybody should get the same sentence. You can process a lot of things on that sort of basis. So it's dealing with admin.
Hold on, law being a science, not an art.
It's so difficult. It's such a
what about the
human
spirit
thing.
of the law versus the letter of the law? And you've got 10 seconds.
What about
Yeah, 10 seconds. I'll tell you, the answer is the Sentencing Council, which is exactly that. It is a science. It's supposed to be a formula for sentencing people. AI can help.
OK. Andrew, Emma, thank you both very much indeed. All right, time for the papers at 8:46 with the lawyer Andrew Eborn and the journalist Emma Wolfe. Good morning.
Good morning.
Emma, can we have a quick word about UK clubs, because then we're going to have a look at our report.
Yeah, well, we know that the hospitality industry obviously has gone under huge sort of pressures, and lots of bars and clubs have been closing down.
Yes.
Having a terrible time, hit from all sides, really, after the pandemic and lockdown and everything. Ellie was talking about a report that you'd done in the early days after COVID.
Yeah, 2021, when the reopening of the clubs after COVID.
Wow. And the impact of all of that, of lockdown on the hospitality industry, but also changing culture. People staying at home more, people being addicted to their smartphones. She's starting to bang the drum.
And it's too expensive a night out now. It's costing
expensive for
a pint in London is crazy from what it used to be.
For a round of drinks costing £40 rather than 10 or whatever. So I think, as you say, you have a report on the hospitality industry, but UK clubs facing extinction, apparently.
I mean, it's thoroughly
so sad
depressing.
as well. It's so sad.
It is sad. It's part of youth. I can imagine nothing worse.
I don't. Yeah.
But it's part of growing up. Anyway, we sent Adam Cherry out clubbing in the name of journalism.
What are the problems the nighttime economy faces in London at the moment?
It's a loaded question, isn't it, these days? Well, plenty. Licensing, culture change, business rates, duty on VAT. I mean, there are many problems that we're facing. Promoters then became venues. and that sort of manifested itself. And then what we've seen in 20 years is the failed policy that was adopted, I mean, particularly by, I hate to say it, Westminster, and trying to clean up areas with the wrong intent, draconian licensing, and it just strangled. It was a sort of...
strangled the creativity. Yeah. There's no opportunities in central London for young creatives anymore to make the next thing happen.
Do you guys like a night out in London?
Yeah, we do. It's good.
It's good. So, do you find, is it difficult after about 10 or 11 o'clock to get a drink and to have a good night out? Do you have to plan it a little bit more than you'd like, or is it quite easy?
It depends on the area you go to as well. Like, I'm surprised tonight it's quite quiet.
Catcalling is terrible, just feels unsafe. I wouldn't walk on my own in Camden.
Yeah, I had a bad experience in Aldgate about catcalling, but apart from that, I've never had a problem or anything on a night out.
I mean, there was a pub there, basically. And the reality is this, is that it's not just a knock-on effect for the clubs themselves, but it's like the entertainment industry. A lot of bands, a lot of musicians, that's where they need to start in this sort of basis. You're turning down those small clubs. Harvey Goldsmith is a neighbour, and we speak about these big venues. People like Taylor Swift are doing really, really well. But the smaller acts coming up, that's how they used to do it. They used to come through the clubs. If you get rid of the clubs, it's a knock-on effect for the whole industry. Very sad. But there are still some great places where you can do things. You can make a lot of fun out there. Soho is full of all sorts of exciting places, and we should shine a spotlight on the good stuff.
Right.
But I think if you're seeing central London that empty on a Wednesday, Thursday night, you know, what is the rest of the country like? Because we know that shops and, you know, clubs and pubs are closing down all over the country. It's not easy.
I think you're right to mention a cultural shift, though, because we do know that Gen Z, Gen Z, they don't drink.
They don't drink as much. Yes. There's also, I think, all sorts of relationship issues. It's, you know, this thing about, are you allowed to approach people? Are you allowed to talk to people? Are you allowed to make a move? All of the funny things that I remember from my teenage years and clubbing and going to pubs and things. You know, there's a lot more caution and kind of, you know, rules in place.
There's been a recent report.
It's a cultural shift.
Oh, let's talk about. Let's move on to something else because I'm fascinated by this. In the FT.
Yes.
Goldman Sachs.
Yes.
And Apple.
Fined 89 million, small change for both of them. But the reality is this: they've got rules and regulations as opposed to how you handle complaints. So when there's a dispute about payments, you need to do it in an appropriate way. They didn't follow that appropriate way. So that's what they're looking at there. That's the fine. What's happening is that Goldman and Apple, they're all dabbling in different payment gateways and so on and so forth, because that's how you make your margins. But you have to comply with the rules and regulations where the customers are centric. And that's what you need to do. You need to make sure that happens and the relevant rules and regulations are followed. They didn't do it in this instance. So they're basically, whenever there's a dispute, they have to follow a particular procedure, and they didn't in all of those instances.
They should know that, though, shouldn't they?
Well, this is the surprising thing. This is crazy, isn't it? You turn around, the reason history repeats itself is people don't learn the lessons from history. There are very clear rules and regulations in place as to what you have to do, and they didn't do that. But basically, they've made a push into financial services. Apple, 5 years ago, after that's what happened, it tried to make a push into these financial services. If you can control the whole ecosystem, so you do the payment gateway, you do the services and everything else, that's how you make your margin. But the rules are there to protect the consumer. Don't follow those at your own peril.
Yeah.
Emma, let's have a look at the Daily Mirror, shall we? And this is off the back of the Chris Cabba case. And now there's been a development, hasn't there, in protections for police firearms officers?
Yeah, well, this is the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has been saying that in the wake of the Chris Cabba hearing that we had on Monday, obviously Martin Blake was the firearms officer who was responsible, and he was cleared of the gang members' murder. But she's been talking about the protections that need to be put in place, or that will be put in place, that will be brought in, so that basically cops who are killing in the line of duty will not have their identity revealed, that they will have anonymity. There will be a presumption of anonymity in court. Apparently there was £10,000 offered for the name and address of Martin Blake. So it's an extremely vulnerable position as a policeman, as a firearms officer, to be in.
It is awful naming people, but you're right about the 10,000 price on the head was awful that people are reporting it, and I think this is terrible. You wonder why that's being reported so much. I won't comment any further. But also I think it's wrong for people to be named when they haven't gone through due process. Trial by the media is wrong in so many different ways. You understand in certain cases, in case there might be more victims come forward, but clearly where people's lives, it's not just the officer concerned, but the family as well, that's where it's wrong.
Yeah, I think the job of a firearm officer is horrific.
It's not enviable, and then you simply get a situation where people say, well, we won't carry firearms.
And apparently that's what they're doing. They're handing it back in now, apparently, as a result of these threats.
Well, I'm
Either
not
you want us to do our jobs or not, but...
We've only got a minute left.
Baked potatoes!
Oh, go on, baked potatoes.
Oh, go on, cheer us all up. Well, apparently, office workers are so skint these days, 88% of them are changing from pricey food, shop-bought food, to the humble but very nutritious.
It's very good for you.
Potato, very, very good
just
for you.
microwaving it in
They're
the
just
office.
having a baked potato. The favourite toppings are grated cheese still.
Yes.
But also instant noodles.
No, don't. There's too many carbs. Carb on carb is not good.
Well, a Marmite, I wouldn't eat it, but I can see.
Marmite on a
that you
baked
could put on a
potato.
baked potato. But instant noodles on a baked potato,
yeah.
that is so wrong.
Baked beans and cheese.
Baked beans and cheese.
Butter and Marmite.
No.
On a baked
Butter with a northern accent sounds a lot better. Butter.
That's really lovely.
Is that nice? But people put Marmite on spaghetti and things. I mean...
Oh, I like Marmite. It's really good with a meat sauce. Absolutely. It brings out the flavour, but not on a baked potato.
Don't give him any ideas now. You'll be going home and trying
will.
Marmite through spaghetti. That's tonight's dinner, isn't it?
I'd give it a whirl.
Baked
Give it a whirl.
potato is incredibly nutritious.
It is.
It's cheap, isn't it?
It's cheap, it's nutritious.
Versatile.
Exactly.
Do
And
lots with it.
Spuds U Like. There used to be a whole chain of those. I think they disappeared. So bring them
Like.
back. That's
Well,
what
yes.
you need.
Bring them back.
the
Properly
Spud
cooked.
Bros are making it trendy again.
Oh, well, there you go. Cheap and fun. That's what we like.
Hey.
Emma,
like me.
Andrew, we are out
Thank
of
you.
time with you. Thank you very much indeed. Let's...